A very good evening and welcome to this week's last episode of On the Record. My name is Vuyo Mvoko. On tonight's show, President Jacob Zuma today once again emphasizing the need to address the land question. And while some demand an apology for saying the land was stolen, some opposition MPs have taken offense. Well, on Tuesday's debate of no confidence in the president, Peter Groenewald held no punches. In his speech, he demanded an apology from the president, saying his statement that the land was stolen stands in contravention with his oath of office.
Die agbare president gaan en hy hou 'n toespraak. En in sy toespraak met die verjaarsdagvieringe van die ANC sê hy onder andere dat grond is die oorsaak van armoede in Suid-Afrika, van werkloosheid en van ongelykheid. En dan sê hy, die grond is gesteel. Nou wil ek vandag vir u sê, artikel 83 van die grondwet plaas 'n grondwetlike plig op die president. Artikel 83C sê dat die president moet nasiebou bevorder en die harmonie bevorder tot voordeel van Suid-Afrika. Maar die agbare president kom en hy skep rasseverdeling. I want to say to you, the honorable president should apologize to the white people of South Africa to say that they have stolen the land. That is a lie. He is contravening the Constitution.
Well, Mr. Peter Groenewald is here in the studio with me to debate his comments, but perhaps what we should do, how we should deal with the land question. Welcome, sir, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, next to him is the EFF, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. Welcome to you too, sir.
Thank you for your...
And of course, last but not least is Mr. Thomas Walters from the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, also joining us from our Cape Town studio is Mr. Temba Godi of the APC. Welcome to you too, sir.
Thank you.
Well, let me start with you, Mr. Groenewald. You felt so offended, and you felt that the president needed to apologize to whites that he had said the land was stolen.
That's correct, Vuyo. And it's quite simple. The president is not only a member of an opposition party or just a political party. He is the president of South Africa. And if you say that the land has been stolen, everybody knows that it is referring that the whites have stolen the land. And by saying that, the president actually saying that the whites of South Africa are criminals. Because if you're a thief, if you have stolen something, then you're a criminal. And I said it quite clearly. You know, Section 83 of the Constitution is quite clear. His job, to put it simple, is to build the nation and the cohesion of the nation. He must do nation building. It's an obligation from the Constitution. Even if you go at his oath, the oath he is taking when he becomes the president is that he promises to the country that he will protect and promote the rights of all the people in South Africa. And now let me say this. You know, it's not the first time that we hear that the land has been stolen. Even before the EFF came into parliament, in 2012 and 2013, we had these debates where the ANC members in parliament stood up and blatantly said, but the white people of South Africa have stolen the land. Now we know that's a lie. And if you want and to ensure that there's nation building in South Africa, if you brand me as a criminal, then I say you should apologize, because a president of a country cannot say that his citizens, especially the white citizens, are thieves.
Well, Mr. Ndlozi, your comrades have said just as much.
Well, I think that there is a distinction here. President Zuma is obviously putting himself in a usual position of uselessness, where he makes useless statements as a sitting president, if he believes indeed in the claims that he's making, if the ANC believes in the claims that they're making, it is true that then they must, constitute a prosecutorial process where they get the land back from it have been stolen. Now, but let's go to the deeper issue here that I think Mr. Groenewald is missing. And that's because of the asphyxiation of intellectual dishonesty that has characterized FF Plus ideology. If you believe that apartheid and colonization were crimes against humanity, as the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa claims, as well as the United Nations and international law in general, if you believe, then they were essentially crimes of land dispossession, not just through the Land Act of 1913, not just through the massive removals of the post-1948, but including the wars of colonial dispossession, of having found an indigenous people. I mean, Jan van Riebeeck literally said the Khoi and the San people did not have certificates to prove that the land belonged to them, so they had a right to dispossess them of that land through violence. If you believe in the premises of the Constitution that you so enthusiastically quote, then you must know that the claim that the land is stolen is actually a historic fact that the Constitution agrees with. Hence, the Constitution makes a provision of how it should be dealt with. So it's useless, it's futile to enter both for the ideological assumptions of FF+, but also the ANC to constantly take platform, say empty things. If they so believe, then they must follow a process of not buying the land. In the interest of building unity, in the interest of resolving the colonial and apartheid past, you can't buy stolen land if you believe that that land was there or the land problem is as a result of colonial dispossession and apartheid dispossession.
Mr. Walters, I'll ask you. Let's get everyone to get here. You will, certainly.
In regards to President Zuma's comments, look, I think possibly, and according to some, President Zuma is a better or bigger expert on theft than many others. So I'm not sure whether we should take anything that comes out of his mouth at the moment seriously. We saw what happened with the weekend Minister of Finance that we had. We saw with his absolute disastrous handling of the current drought crisis that we have in South Africa. So I don't take that comment too seriously myself. The real issue is that our land reform context in South Africa is influenced by a history of apartheid, where most definitely black South Africans were discriminated against. It's influenced by a history of colonialism that includes dispossession, but it's also not an exclusive story. It's more complex than that. And thirdly, ANC, comprehensive failure of the ANC in implementing land reform properly. I think we have a lot of things that are taking attention away from the real debate. Comments like land is stolen when there's redistribution policies that are not implemented properly. Our departure point is that if government was really focusing on redistributing in a win-win manner in South Africa, private property rights to as many South Africans as policy, our economy would be going forward. If we were concentrating on making land reform models that work, actually implementing that and duplicating that right throughout the country, then we would have had a different context in South Africa in land reform. We could have had a transformed agricultural sector if the ANC did its job in government. That's our position.
But do you agree or disagree with a view that says that land was taken away from the people who had it?
In many cases in South Africa, in varying degrees in various parts of South Africa. But once again, if you start disaggregating that statement, you ignore legal acquisition of land that also took place. It's not the whole truth. I think that's the point. We mustn't deal in absolutes in the land reform debate. In fact, polarizing statements, absolutes like this, is exactly what is destroying a meaningful dialogue around land reform. And that is the DA's position. We believe that we can find one another in the land reform debate, and we can really empower and diversify our agricultural sector in South Africa.
We'll come to that. We'll come to
May I just say something? Why is the ANC not here? Or is Mr. Gordy representing the ANC? But where's
no, let's go to Mr. Gordy. Mr. Gordy, in Cape Town, the departure point for your party, was the land taken away, well, legally?
Yeah, look. No, look. We all know the history of this country, and the call by the FF Plus on Tuesday was part of a series of statements that come from white parties that seek to insult the dignity of Africans. And my take was that the EFF, the Freedom Front Plus, is trying to position itself within the white community by insulting Africans. Look, we all know that land was taken from Africans. We can go into the semantics of the inconvenience of theft and dispossession by violence, neither here nor there. The substance is that the pain, the humiliation that Africans went through in the process of land dispossession, cannot be reduced to a debate over semantics of whether the land was stolen or not. And I think that it is about time that the representatives of white society in Parliament appreciate that the fact that Africans had a paradigm shift post-1994 does not mean that they're ignorant of history, and that the challenge remains with the white community to demonstrate that they themselves have actually shifted from that pre-94 mindset through which and by which Africans were treated as if they are non-existent. And I think the statement on Tuesday by the Freedom Front and all other antics that we see in Parliament continuously tell us in our faces that no, the mindset within the white community has not substantively changed.
Thank you, Vuyo. Firstly, I want to start by saying that if the EFF wants an intellectual, can I say, discussion and education on the ideology of the Freedom Front Plus, I propose that my colleague come for a workshop that he can really understand what the ideology is. Because you see, that is part of the problem. The politicians come here and they just make sweeping statements, like Ndlozi has just done, Mr. Ndlozi has just done, to say that apartheid has been declared a crime to humanity by the United Nations. Now, he's only partly right, because
where is he wrong?
No, in the 70s, the General Assembly accepted the motion, but it has never been endorsed by the Security Council. In fact, if you go and look at the facts, you will find that the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, even Sweden voted against that motion.
But that doesn't make it up. They voted against so many
the
things.
fact is,
That
but it is very popular to just say that. The fact of the matter is, if you say the land was taken, how? Was it by means of war? It's a bit different to say it has been stolen. Because you see, it is also suitable for some politicians to say when Jan van Riebeeck came here, what happened before Jan van Riebeeck came here? Then the blacks who migrated from Central Africa, they then took the land from the Khoi and the San. So can I then say, if we take this argument, that the blacks have stolen the land from the Khoi and the San? Because that is actually according to the definition. If I take, for instance, what the Chief Whip Zinzani has said in Parliament to me, that the land has been taken through the barrel of the gun, that is stealing. Then I can make the following statement to say, and the Khoi and the Sons, their land were taken by the Shield and the Assegai, and that is stealing. And that is my point. Do we want in South Africa only going back to the past every time and say that everything has been stolen and now everything must be given back?
Let's help Mr.
Now let me say that to you quite clearly.
But give me a chance to speak. But
I do not accept.
I think we'll have to give the other people a chance to speak. Let them get it.
I will not accept.
You can't accept
to be insulted to say that I have stolen the land.
Okay, let's hear what Mr. Ndlozi said.
No, I mean, it's your business to take it as an insult, but
you also take it as an insult.
Listen, I listened to you.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Listen
it's your
carefully.
business to think that historical facts are insults. So I'm going to insult you now, and you have to take it because this is the truth. The truth that many of the people that you represent, particularly of your generations, must begin to appreciate that you are beneficiaries of generations and generations of discrimination, of the total dehumanization of black people, which included taking their land. Not just here in Johannesburg, up even to Cairo. the entire colonial project that
Where were you?
your generations represent,
Where were you?
the generations before you, I listened to you, so you're going to listen. The generations before you, you sit here with the privilege, not because you work hard, not because you are smarter
Who are
than
you
all
to
of
say
us.
I didn't work
No,
hard?
not because you
What
work
do you know
hard.
about me?
or
I'm
you
going to say
are
I didn't work
smarter.
hard.
No, I'm not saying you don't work hard.
Okay,
I'm
you
saying
said that.
the
Can I just
privilege
offer
that
different-
you enjoy doesn't come because you work hard.
Okay.
It comes because of colonization and apartheid, which were
I
crimes
don't think
in
I
as
think we
far
can
as
all agree
democracy is
that
That's your
concerned.
view. That's your
Okay,
view.
Mr.
Crimes
Walters,
against humanity.
Look, I think we can all agree this type of discussion doesn't take us forward. I think it's debating the past. And of course, we have to take lessons from the past. There's no doubt that there were racial discrimination, dispossession. But as I said, we can't simplify it. It's not the entire truth. Afrikaans-speaking people in South Africa of all races are also indigenous people. So there's a lot of layers and complexities to this debate. The question is really, what are we going to do going forward, taking this debate forward? Now, treating a current generation of farmers who might or might not have been the descendants of farmers that were there when the wars of dispossession took place as criminals, and calling them criminals and land thieves, is treating illegal, legitimate investors in land and agriculture that we desperately need in South Africa, that would be wrong. I think that is wrong. Having said that, we also need to make sure that black South Africans and the talent that is available for most South Africans that we can include in the agricultural sector, that must be brought to the fore.
You know,
There's
I
examples
prefer
of
Mr.
that.
Groenewald
There's
to the
examples.
DA.
There's examples
I
to
really
that.
do.
I'm sure you prefer.
That's
Because
a
there's no
case of
honesty.
death.
There's no honesty to the DA.
Both of you.
I mean, how do you say that
two sides of the same
a
coin?
white
But
investor
anyway, let
that
me finish
buys
my
land in
point.
Okay, let him to finish his point. Let him to finish his point. I'll give you a chance. I'll give you a chance.
These are South Africans, along with beneficiaries, incidentally, of land reform. Black farmers in South Africa who invest money, time and effort in making agriculture work. This debate, two sides of the same coin, is not taking us forward. Now, what we need to do,
Let's deal with
is actually look at what failed. Why did land reform not succeed in South Africa, and what worked? What did work is share equity schemes in the Western Cape, where there's a massively different result, a vastly different result to what happened in other provinces, between 60 and 80% successful land reform projects compared to between 72 and 90% failure rate in the rest of South Africa. Share equity schemes can work. Transfer of private property
No, you are
rights.
guilty of
redress.
what you are guilty of.
Redress. Redress cannot work.
Mr.
without
Groenewald was
title
doing.
deed, without people getting property. But I think maybe we should not.
I'm going to give you a chance, but I need to give Mr. Cody a
just think
chance.
they must
But
dominate all the
after
time.
this short break, when we return, this conversation
Yeah,
continues.
Mr. Rounded, yeah.
How great would it be to have Sia back for this reunion?
He's been traveling Africa for years. He's impossible to get a hold of.
We know what he drinks.
Let's find him.
You think it worked?
Hey, guys!
It all comes together with a castle.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Welcome back. We're discussing the land question, and we have members of parliament from various opposition parties discussing this issue. I'm going to start with you in Cape Town, Mr. Godi, this time around, just to finish your point on your departure point on the issue we are debating tonight.
Yeah,
Having heard what your fellow MPs have had to say.
Yeah, no, I think, look, Vuyo, we can't run away from the past because the present is a product of the past. So we need to ensure that our starting point, we have a common starting point, a common understanding of the past. And that past, whether you say land was stolen or land was taken forcibly or land was taken through colonial laws like the Native Land Act, it's neither here nor there. It is the substance, the content, which is that land was taken from the African people without their consent. They were forced to part with that productive land. And indeed, it is that dispossession which became the basis of their poverty, which became the basis of the inequality. If you look at the 1913 Land Act, actually it was passed because white farmers were worried about the rising class of African farmers. And they said to their parliamentarians, if you want to come back, make sure that these capable people become our workers and not work for themselves. So the fact of the matter is that history has to be known. And I wish that one day white people could be exposed to the actual pain and anger that black people have, that they harbor, that they feel in their hearts, which they've been prepared to suppress for the sake of our transition in 1994, which I think, listening to what the DA, the Freedom Front, and all these other parties in Parliament tells you that they actually take it for granted. And that is why they can talk the way the Freedom Front has done, to actually say, we demand an apology on behalf of all white people because you have said that land was stolen. When we know that the grinding poverty and the shameful inequality that afflicts our country has its roots in the dispossession of land for the African people.
Now, you're not going to agree as these 4 members of parliament from their various or your respective parties about this departure point. The question then is, what do we do now? Where to from here? Mr. Godi, if you can just kick off.
Yeah, no. You see, Vuyo, unless we agree on the facts, because the facts don't have to agree with anybody. The facts are there. They are stubborn. They are stuck. They are there. The fact that white people own land outside their population size tells you a story of what happened in the past. And so when we want to correct that past, we need to actually come to terms with it, admit it, accept it, and say that no, in this country where Africans are 80% of the population, they can't live on less than 20% of the land. Africans cannot just be consumers and not have access to productive land so that they can also contribute their talents and their capabilities and their potential to ensure that our country produces much, much more than what we have and export to other countries. And they can improve their standard of living. They can improve their lot. And we can, by reducing inequality, actually reduce and fight against the racism that rears its head on a daily basis and from time to time.
Mr. Walters?
Yeah, look, I think to a large extent, Mr. Godi echoes what I'm saying. I think we must look at the facts.
No. Oh, please.
We need to look at the facts.
I'd rather be struck by lightning than to agree with the DA.
Yeah, but look, ANC doesn't have, the APC doesn't have to agree with the DA. But the 80 billion rands from 1994 to now has been wasted. That could have been, if you look at the commercial value of agricultural land in South Africa, 190 billion rands. We could have had, if that money was spent properly, plus the exponential growth of the value of that money, we could have had a transformed agricultural
Can I just ask you to do this?
This is a policy failure. Those are facts.
Okay. Can I ask you to do this?
All of us agree.
No, can I ask you to do this?
We need transformation. We need diversification.
Can I ask you to do this? Since you cannot agree on the history, how this all started and how it evolved, can we put that aside? And since we cannot talk about who didn't do what, because we can't agree even on how this evolved, right? Let's talk now about what we need to do next?
That's
what from where the DA says? I don't want you to talk about policy failures. I want you to talk about what you are putting on the table as the Democratic Alliance.
What the Democratic Alliance is putting on the table is share equity schemes, win-win partnerships with the commercial agricultural sector to make sure that black farmers are successful commercial farmers. We want private title deed given to land reform beneficiaries, occupants of communal land, state land, that we believe that gives people a real stake in the economy, it gives people assets in the economy so that they can participate in the economy. It gives you collateral to go to a bank. It means that you can invest in education, you can invest in business, you can invest in growing, participating, exporting more, as Mr. Gordy said earlier. In fact, the DA has a very strong, very successful land reform policy. We even challenged a year ago, we challenged other provinces from the Western Cape to implement the National Development Plan better than the Western Cape. We intend leading land reform policy from the DA side.
Mr. Groenewald?
Well, firstly, we're not going to solve the land issue by insulting the white people, telling them they've stolen the land. We're not going to solve the land issue.
We've moved from that point.
No.
I want us to put proposals on the table that say, where do we go from here? Otherwise, we're going to be stuck there and not move.
Yeah, but you see, then allegations were made. Now, let me put it quite clear. The history, everybody agrees, it is important in the whole issue of land reform. Now, I just say this to you. History is not that simple to just say that the land has been stolen. You're not going to solve the problem. Because treaties were between black people and white people. Do we say that that didn't count? Do we say the Ngans Treaty, for instance, had no value? Because then we say that he had no integrity. What I want to say is, history is not that simple. And maybe we should have a workshop on the history of land in South Africa, because this program is maybe too short as far as that is concerned. But to keep on insulting people, to say that you've stolen the land, then I'm telling you, you're not going to solve it. How do you solve the land issue? You solve the land issue firstly by acknowledge the fact that the mere fact to own land doesn't make you rich. That's not true. That's a myth.
Do you have a piece of land?
I don't have a farm. I have a piece of land where my house is, yes.
Can you give it away? Just someone since it's not going to make you rich.
Even if I had a farm, I wouldn't give it away. Because the fact of the matter is people believe that if you have a piece of land, then you can become rich. In fact,
but you have the luxury of saying that because you do have a piece of land. There are people who are dying to have a fraction of what you've got.
Okay, if we want to say that, firstly, and the Freedom Front Plus, as I personally have asked in Parliament since 2005, please tell us how many land in South Africa is owned by whites, how many by blacks, how many by brown people, and how many by Indian. And I've asked a question this beginning of the week, please can we get the results of the audit report? Because, well, you know what? Demagori said that the majority of white people have it. It's wrong. The state alone, the government, owes about 23% of all land in South Africa. And in fact, the economist, Mr. Schuessler, made public last week that if you take all the dwellings, that black people at this stage in South Africa, if that property where my house is standing, if you take that for an example, more than 50% of land in South Africa is owned by blacks. But you see, some people don't want to realize that. Okay, they don't want to acknowledge that.
Own 50% of the land. So what's your problem?
But this FF Plus is very funny, I must say. I mean, no wonder, actually, you don't represent, even democratically, majority of the white community. The ridiculousness of thinking you can even speak.
Do you think you represent the majority of the blacks?
I haven't spoken that I'm seeking an apology on behalf of the black population. I think that it's laughable. The EFF's point of departure is very simple. That is, we've got to expropriate land without compensation for equal redistribution. And this is where the violence of capitalist forms of exchange that the DA and the ANC are advocating have failed. There's nothing that the DA is saying that hasn't been attempted in the past 22 years. We've been attempting to buy land back, but we don't succeed. We spend billions and billions of rands. Ownership share schemes is not land reform. It's actually share in agribusiness. It doesn't give black people access to the land. There are 3 forms of land. There's residential land. If you're going to solve the problem of Alexander, of Khayelitsha, if you're in the Western Cape government, for an example, if you're going to solve the problem of Khayelitsha, it's a land problem. You would have already, that's the first point of departure, give people decent homes by first giving them a breathing space, proper yards. That's the first question of land, residential land for settlement. The second part of the land is land to tilt, to eat, not to get rich, to feed ourselves, to have in our economy our ability to have food sovereignty. We've got to make a list of all the products that we can produce in South Africa, begin to protect those markets locally, invest, and have domestic markets open up to produce for ourselves and feed ourselves. The third part of the land is the minerals beneath the soil. No one came with gold to South Africa. It therefore must belong as much as possible to the benefit of all. How does it do that? It must, all the proceeds that we get from platinum, from gold and all other minerals must go into building social programs of the state. The provision of free quality higher education, for an example, up to the attainment of the first degree. That's the EFF's land policy. We will be stuck in the last 22 years dilemma if we go with the logic of capitalist exchange. That is, let's give people, we'll have a mala, we'll have billions and billions of rands that are spent on getting 2 hectares, 3 hectares, because there are no willing sellers. You heard, I'm not willing to give my piece of land away. Okay. So land reform,
hold your thought.
It is fundamental to nation building in that way.
Hold your thought right there. Now, you've heard what he says or what he believes is wrong with what you were saying, as you are prescribing as a solution. What is wrong with what he is saying?
First of all, that he says there's no willing sellers. That's factually not true. What we have in South Africa is willing seller, because every year up to 6% of agricultural land goes onto the marketplace, but very confused buyer. Now, if you have any real experience with dealing with land reform issues, like I have sitting on the committee, on the portfolio committee, you will know that there's a massive problem in the department spending that money that to actually purchase land. There's a problem with the strategy of how the government purchases land. So, and also when he says that all these things have been attempted and it was not successful, that's not true. The only place where share equity schemes were successfally implemented, and I'm talking now in a holistic manner.
Share equity schemes are not land ownership.
Because you also don't know what share equity schemes are. You actually have the beneficiaries can own 100% of the land, but the agribusiness that operates it, that's where the share aspect comes in. You're speaking factually not correct in that regard as well. And also the vision that you, and that part I incidentally appreciate, of living space, a decent home, that's actually something that the DA, when we talk about private title deed being transferred, imagine every house in South Africa, RDP house being built, every housing scheme in South Africa translated into private title deed. Today at the moment, people are selling, because they don't have full title deed, selling land informally amongst one another only for 20% of its value. So with the DA policy in a tax-neutral way, will inject billions into an economy that way.
Can I ask Mr. Thomas a direct question?
Factually, I have a problem with what the EFF is saying.
I want to know, you said earlier on the DA believes that part of the land was criminally taken.
Okay.
So should we buy
criminally?
Can I ask? Should we spend government money, taxpayers' money, to buy if it can be proven? I mean, you said we believe that some of the land was criminally taken. Colonization is a crime.
No, what I said was there were wars. I said wars of dispossession is part of the story.
So you don't believe?
The point that I wanted to make towards the EFF, and I said this earlier, to treat the current owners of the farmers, the current people owning the land, producing in land, and investing in that land, calling them criminal, I think is unfair. That is stereotyping. That doesn't take us forward. It just polarizes the debate. You mentioned earlier a workshop where we have to discuss history. Can I suggest that we have lots of dialogues? We not only discuss history, but how we take lessons from this history and take it into the future and make things work.
And we don't talk alone. Mr. Godi, I mean, you've had the solutions or some of the proposals that have been put on the table. Can you your thoughts on the what are you putting on the table?
Well, look, Vuyo, I think the problem will always be the starting point, because you see, with the
but we
adoption
can't,
of the
Mr.
Freedom
Godi,
Charter
go
by
back to the starting point.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
sure. No, I'm
we're
not going to
devote
the past.
the
No, I'm
entire
not going to the
program talking
past.
about the starting point. I think let's agree to disagree on that one and put on the table, like what the DA and the EFF have done, Mr. Groenewald has refused to do.
Now I'm going to do now.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine, Vuyo. I think the point I'm making here is that there are two elements to it. The first one is the fact that we cannot approach land reform as if it's a normal, market-driven transaction without appreciating the historical context. That's number one. Number two, it is the current policy where government has to expend a lot of money to acquire land and not have enough to support the new farmers. Whereas in the past, white people will take land for no money and have enough money to support the ineffective white farmers at that time. So we need to have effective government support for the new farmers, have enough money, have enough people to support these people, but ensure that access to land should not be determined on a purely capitalist, free market transaction, because you have to take into account the context and the past, that access to land is part of the process of trying to heal the nation and bring about social cohesion. So you need to ensure that government, well, I've seen we've just passed the expropriation bill. I hope it's not going to be a useless tool that is not utilized effectively and promptly to ensure that our people are able to have access to land and there is sufficient support mechanism to ensure that they become successful, so that people don't get land and at the end of the day it is not used. I do know, you go to areas like Piet Retief, you find semi-illiterate people who are very successful farmers, whom the white farmers go and steal their cattle or throw them out of the land and destroy their farming equipment. So it is not that we don't have people who can farm or people who are capable, who have the skills, who have the know-how, but it is that they don't get the support and they don't get access to the best lands that is still in the hands of white farmers.
Okay, Mr. Godi, thanks very much. We're going to continue with this discussion after this short break. Do stay with us.
Searching for the guy who steps up, way up, the queen of the pop and lock, and whatever this is, the party train conductor. All aboard! The answer is yes, you are that guy, and we salute you, party comrade. Join the movement online.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Record, and tonight's topic, the land question. What do we do as a nation to ensure that we deal with this question decisively and hopefully once and for all? Well, President Jacob Zuma addressed the House of Traditional Leaders today, where he did touch on this issue. Just take a listen to part, just a little bit of what he said on this particular issue.
The dispossession of our land is the source of the poverty and inequality which have become the ugly hallmark of our nation and an impediment to a future of shared prosperity. I strongly believe that access to land and security of land, tenure, are key to development, especially agricultural development. Let me underline this point because I believe among many things we talk about in our country, this is one of the most fundamental problems. Today we talk about triple challenge that we have: poverty, inequality, unemployment. At times when people talk about this today, they talk about it as if it was created by freedom, as if before 1994 there was plenty of everything. People have forgotten. They even write volumes to try to criticize the government, that this government has brought this kind of challenges. And we are working on a number of programs to try to address these. But can we address poverty, inequality, and unemployment without addressing the land question fundamentally? I don't think we can.
Can we, Mr. Groenewald?
Let's agree that we disagree strongly with the Honourable President, firstly from the Freedom Front's point of view. I want to say what I said earlier, that we will not solve the land issue by making allegations of theft and everything. What we should do, firstly, we should take the Ngonyama Trust, it's about 3 million hectares, and start by giving the people that's living on that piece of land, giving them private property ownership. Let them do that.
Why the
Secondly,
Ngonyama Trust?
Well, it is in the control of the Zulu people. So, why can't we do that? Because we said we need some ownership for black people.
Why are you isolating the...
Well, that's a good example to start, to say that if we say we want to give back the land, let me start there. And then the other thing I want to say...
And go where from there?
Well, I hear from everybody that that is the solution. Just give people private ownership and then property rights. Then the problem will be solved because we have to take the land back. But let's go further. The Freedom Front Plus believe that this problem can be solved by the principle of willing buyer, willing seller. It is a lie, another lie to say that it was not a success. And you know, if I listen to my colleagues here, especially from the EFF, I say, well, they're also funny in this sense that they're an opposition party, they're not even the official opposition, and it is very easy to just make populist statements and unrealistic promises.
Well, the official opposition seems to disagree with you. You do, don't you, Mr.
But because, I'm still speaking.
No, but you can't,
let's be fair. You gave the other people more time to say something. I want to say.
But I gave you a lot of time, but you refused to say what I was asking you to
Well, I'm still busy talking and you just interrupt me.
But you're still on the first point.
I said I didn't mention the principle of willing buyer, willing seller in the first point. I'm talking of how to solve it. That is what I'm saying.
But that's why you spent most of your time. That's what I'm saying.
No, what do you want to know?
You spent most of your time going back to what we asked right at the beginning. And when I asked you to put proposals on the tables, you didn't.
No,
and now you want to speak a lot more.
No, sorry, I won't be intimidated.
No, I'm not intimidating you, but I'm trying to get to...
Let me be very clear about this. The program started with what I said in Parliament.
Yes.
Yes, and that is the starting point of this debate. And let it be clear.
But I said that's more beyond that point.
You will not intimidate me to say that I don't go back to that. Because that was the start of this debate.
Yeah, but when you eat your own time, then you can't complain about somebody else.
It's a discussion. It's a discussion.
Okay, let's hear what you have to say.
I would like to comment on the President. I think you have to consider that increasingly the ANC policy is, in fact, to prevent exactly what Mr. Groenewald is referring to, giving people ownership over the land that they occupy and live on currently. In places like Inter Alia, the Ingonyama Trust, it's often been a point of discussion in Parliament. I think what he's doing is he's trying to pander for traditional leaders, very similar, incidentally, to the colonial and apartheid governments as well, maintaining their power rather than looking at the ability of individual people living on the land to own the land and I don't think it's only about giving people land. You have to have appropriate extension services, which has collapsed under the ANC government. You need to have a proper agricultural research infrastructure, which has collapsed under the ANC government. All those things that you need to have in place. And I appreciate the fact that we know where we disagree with the EFF. My concern with the EFF's approach to land reform is if you look at other places in the world where this type of approach was taken, take Cambodia. Today, it's entirely donor dependent. Medieval Cambodia has produced more rice than Cambodia after Pol Pot. Zimbabwe, 1/3 of the population of Zimbabwe has left. Venezuela, Chavism has led to a collapse. It's a country currently in collapse. That's why I have difficulty accepting the proposals of the EFF. Although I do think they put far more on the table than Mr. Gordy, for example. But what we need in South Africa is an honest dialogue. We need to look at what failed in the policy, not generalize, not have polarizing debates like we currently have. And incidentally, most South Africans, white and black, don't think in this dichotomy of white and black. Surveys have proven that. Most South Africans want a constitutional democracy where we have sensible land reform that works. And that's what the DA supports. And unfortunately, the President is pandering. I think when he opens his mouth, he damages South Africa. It's not what his party incidentally says in committee either.
What would you have said to those traditional leaders if you're the President today?
We must pass a law because the black people in this country are a majority. And if, as black people, we believe that our indignity was caused, as it is indeed a fact, by land dispossession, we must lead a democratic process to institute the return of the land without paying for it. And stop holding permanent, unnecessary dialogues that are taking us nowhere. These dialogues have taken us nowhere. For an example, the two white people that are with me in the studio today, every time we disagree about history, they rise to their white supremacist horse. They tell me, for instance, that I need a workshop. That's what you do. That's what happens in a dialogue. You come already with people who think they know history better than you.
If we stop the dialogue, what do we do?
No, I mean, we have dialogued. There is a democratic process that is outlined by the Constitution. The majority rules. It rules because it wins the election. So the black people in this country don't have land. They can have land by voting in the polls for policies that want to return land without having to pay for it. That, in my view, is the end of the story. Now, the other part that I think it's important to put here is there's nothing polarizing at all. There is nothing polarizing about black people wanting their land back. And I want all South Africans who are black in this country to know that and to be proud of their blackness, never to be spoken down so that they look down and they humble themselves and thinking it's taboo to demand their land without compensation. It's a fact, and I think we're on the right course. You can see President Zuma is a black man crying, screaming, because he's suffocated by policies of house niggers, of house slaves, that are afraid to destabilize the establishment. So, as black people, we must make no apology whatsoever to say we want our land and we want it back without paying for it, and we're going to get it democratically.
Mr. Godi?
I do want to say, Vuyo, that the frustration that the APC has, especially with government or the ANC, is that, they tend to be very tentative in their approach. And even when you go to implementation, you find that there is always a huge gap between implementation as well as policy. What I'm saying is that now we have the expropriation bill, which must just be passed by the NCOP and signed by the president. Then they must go for it.
And you think it's going to solve the problem?
Well, I'm saying it is an instrument, a legal instrument through which we should be able to access land, because at the end of the day, if you say bring back the land, how? There has to be a legal process. Now, the expropriation bill does give us a leeway, except that Section 25 of the Constitution, of course, remains a very, very serious impediment in the sense that the white people always run to courts, and the template of the judicial thinking is Eurocentric. So we might have those challenges, but all I'm saying is that whatever piece of legislation is there that should assist in that process must be utilized firmly, decisively, and promptly to ensure that we address these very challenges of inequality, of poverty, as well as unemployment, so that we can start to say our people also feel they own a piece of land. They can own they can have their sense of being, as human beings in this country, and can indeed say that, yes, we're free. There's a substantive difference in our lives before freedom and our lives now that we're under freedom. We have a sense of ownership. There is something that we own.
Okay. Gentlemen, we've run out of time. We have 4 minutes. I'm going to give each one of you a minute to wrap.
Yeah, I think Mr. Gori didn't read the expropriation bill. He misquoted the Constitution, and I don't think he follows land reform. The DA wants to solve the problem. That's our point of departure. And that means that we need to get South Africans, particularly black South Africans that were discriminated against, get them to access land and own land. There's no such thing as redress, and the government still owns the land. We believe there are successful schemes. That's been proven. We believe that's what the money in South Africa needs to be invested in. In fact, one can also unlock private investment that can drive land reform in South Africa. We believe that title deed is the solution and proper support for South Africans to become a successful society. And we believe that we cannot have a polarizing, simplified, racialized debate. We need to find one another, not divide one another.
In order to solve the spacelessness, the dead, the suffocation of black occupied areas, townships, informal settlements, we need land. And the land for that settlement must not be bought. It will be a serious indictment for an expectation of any piece of money to be spent buying land for black people in this country. There is nowhere else in the world. This is our home. We want the ability to call this place our home. And the ability to call this place our home depends on access to land. Then the economics and the social inclusivity can come after. But we must make no apology. And when we go to the polls this year and in 2019, let us vote for a party that is serious about addressing land on the basis that land belongs to black people who are the indigenous people of this country. Thank you.
Land is an emotional issue, as we saw tonight. And I want to emphasize the fact that we are not going to solve it if we insult each other. There is enough land, available land, in South Africa. And therefore, the Freedom Front Plus say, let's look at those issues to solve it. But you're not going to solve it by insults. Our neighbors, Zimbabwe, they took the land, but they have famine. This is the modern world we are living in. This is 2016. And you will have to solve the problem by modern principles and rules, whether you like it or not.
Thank you very much, Mr. Groenewald. Mr. Godi?
Yeah, in short, some of us fought for freedom with the land at the center of that struggle. And 22 years down the line, we think that government has not done enough, and would want to urge the ANC government to really speed up the process, to act with firmness, to act with some level of self-confidence, in tackling this issue head-on, to address the grinding poverty and the wide inequality that afflicts our society today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Godi, Mr. Groenewald, Mr. Ndlozi, Mr. Walters. Thanks to all of you for being part of this discussion tonight, and hopefully it's not the last time we're having this discussion. Well, that's all we have time for on tonight's episode of On the Record. From all of us, do join us again next Monday. Good night.